Hello and welcome to this project overview of the CLF Whole Building LCA Benchmark Study. I am Brad Banke. I'm a CLF researcher and project manager for this project. And today I'm going to go over the context and importance of why we're conducting this project. I'll provide an overview of the major goals, research questions, and work streams. I'll also talk a little bit about ways that we'll be engaging with stakeholders throughout the course of the project and some next steps and ways that you can get involved or participate with the study. To start off, I'll just cover the broader context of why are we doing this project. And first, it's important to recognize that efforts to reduce embodied carbon in the building industry are actually growing really rapidly, and that there are essentially two broad categories of industry actors that are trying to do the same thing, but through different lenses. So the first is design side actors who are really trying to understand if they've designed a low carbon building. They're trying to collect reliable data to compare their projects against. They're trying to discover what types of design decisions lead to lower embodied carbon buildings and ultimately design lower embodied carbon buildings. There's another group of folks on sort of more the organizational side, such as policymakers, code developers, and rating systems that are trying to understand the significance of embodied carbon for meeting climate targets. They're trying to set limits or reduction targets that will be effective. They're trying to provide guidance and implementation strategies for those targets and ultimately encourage and require lower embodied carbon buildings. And life cycle assessment is a valuable framework to help facilitate this work. And at the CLF, we like to talk about the two commonly different practiced types of life cycle assessment. So on one hand, a material approach, which would use EPDs or custom LCA models to measure and compare building materials and products, versus a whole building approach, which would use whole building LCA tools to measure the performance of entire buildings. There's a few different ways that these incentivize different parties. So on the material approach is really more about product and material selection. So that's incentivizing manufacturers and contractors. Whereas the whole building approach is more of a design side, kind of like getting at the roots of building design. Things that would capturing strategies like building materials and reuse, use of bio-based materials, or efficient structural design. And for this project, we're really focusing on the whole building approach. We're doing that because approaching carbon reductions at the building level can offer greater potential for reductions. Embodied emissions of whole buildings are rarely addressed currently in policy strategies, although that's growing. And building level benchmarks could enable policymakers to set comprehensive and meaningful reduction targets. The last one is that this format really allows for more flexibility in meeting reduction targets for designers or others in the industry because it's performance-based on the whole building. It allows a lot of opportunity to make reductions. So the potential is really great, but challenges definitely still remain in whole building LCA. So it's increasing in practice, but it's definitely still not standardized across geographies, design firms, or individual practitioners. Whole building life cycle assessment models are really difficult to interpret, especially without consistency of modeling practices and reporting standards. There is currently no centralized database of whole building LCA results to compare against or conduct research, especially in North America. And existing studies and publications in North America have been somewhat limited in scope and ineffective at explaining embodied carbon variability. So there is still no broad consensus on why some projects have lower carbon values than others, or if those numbers are significant, and ultimately what design decisions, if any, are driving carbon reductions. So we're taking on this project to answer some of these questions that I've just been posing. What is a reasonable whole building LCA benchmark for new construction projects? What really qualifies as a low carbon building, and how do you know? What is the expected embodied carbon per building element? So things like the building structure, its envelope, its interiors, site, et cetera, or per building characteristics, such as its use, geography, construction type, building heights, et cetera. What is the expected variability associated with modeling practice? So the design tools or the whole building LCA tools that people are using, the background data that's behind those tools, the methodologies, the model resolution, et cetera. And ultimately, what design decisions support the most significant embodied carbon reductions? So to try to answer some of those questions, we launched this project, the CLF Whole Building LCA Benchmark Study V2. It's a long-term multi-year project where we will collect whole building LCA models and develop a database to analyze them. We're looking for at least 200 real-world buildings to be included in this whole building LCA database, including their project attributes, material inventories, and environmental impacts. We're trying to do that with a high degree of standardization and harmonization so that we can also perform some really rigorous statistical analysis on this data and establish embodied carbon benchmarks for each building type, as well as conduct a lot of different forms of analysis. We'll also be doing a lot of background research on existing whole building LCA benchmark studies and relevant literature. We're going to be engaging with a wide range of stakeholder groups for support and feedback on various project efforts. Most importantly, perhaps, we'll be publishing a lot of results, analysis, findings, as well as background research, data collection methods, benchmarks, and an open access version of our building database. Some of the goals and outcomes that we're trying to achieve, I think first and foremost, is to develop relevant benchmark figures so that designers, builders, owners, policymakers, and others can compare the embodied carbon impacts of their buildings. We did a version of this study back in 2017, and we're hoping to really improve on the methods that we use and usability of the data that we output. There's two other goals related to, we want to enable building certification schemes to set benchmarks, limits, or targets based on current data and evaluate projects using consistent methods. We want to also enable policymakers to use the database to test scenarios and set performance requirements to motivate embodied carbon reductions at city, state, federal, local levels so that they can meet their climate targets. We're also trying to encourage additional research and analysis. So by publishing this building database, we know that there's a lot of industry actors that are trying to do research and have a lot of different goals for evaluating whole building LCA benchmarks. So we want to enable that on a really wide scale. So hopefully leading to a better understanding of trends in material use, carbon intensities, building efficiency, and pathways to decarbonization. Broadly speaking, we're also trying to just improve the state of practice with robust and standard methodologies for embodied carbon modeling and reporting, and be able to contribute to harmonization efforts among existing reporting frameworks. And we know there's also a lot of existing similar efforts going on with other organizations that we're hoping to harmonize and collaborate with. So last year, we finished the pilot phase of this study, and I'll talk more about these different phases, but we're now kicking off phases, what we're calling 2 and 3, one of which is a California specific portion of the project, and then the full North American benchmark and database. So for the pilot phase of this study, it was really a test of the infrastructure. We worked with a small group of pilot partners to develop ways to collect and analyze data and tested out data collection templates, reporting processes, as well as identified stakeholders, interested parties, and data gaps that we need to focus on for the full phase of this project. So that was really successful that we wrapped up last year, and we're now kicking off the next 2 phases, phase 2 being the California Total Carbon Report. For this portion of the project, we're going to collect and analyze a smallish data set of California-specific buildings with a big focus on operational and embodied carbon. So we'll be looking at the whole life carbon impacts against different grid decarbonization scenarios, essentially trying to enable designers and policymakers with a precedent for developing methods and initial figures to motivate total carbon reductions. Hopefully with the upcoming report that will be put out later this year. Phase 3 of this study, also kicking off already, or also underway, is the full North American benchmark study and database. For this portion, like I said earlier, we'll be collecting 200 plus high-resolution whole building LCA models and doing a lot of in-depth statistical analysis on those models. Lots of different outcomes from this, but definitely publishing updated CLF North American whole building benchmarks. We want to share the open access database and probably some other publications and sharing as part of this as well. I mentioned stakeholder engagement as a really key part of this project for us. We are currently seeking interested individuals, companies, and organizations to help support the success of the project. Our goal here is really to better understand motivations and constraints of industry actors. And we want to do that by establishing a few different interest groups or working groups for ongoing project support, communication, feedback, and collaboration. The first of these groups will be what we're kind of calling design and data practitioners. You can think of these as design side actors who are trying to design lower carbon buildings, like I kind of mentioned at the beginning. This would be architects, engineers, builders, consultants, or other researchers engaged with whole building LCA. What we're trying to do with this group is have a wide range of practitioners help inform data collection methods, provide feedback on whole building LCA practice, and importantly, contribute data to the study. So people that are actually doing whole building LCA on projects that might be able to share data to the study. Some of the topic areas listed on the right, I won't go through them all, but again, these are AEC practitioners engaged with whole building LCA, so that will involve a lot of topics on standards, methods, building information modeling, data collection, analysis, etc. The next broad category of stakeholders that we're looking to get in touch with are what we're calling organizational stakeholders. These are actors trying to encourage and require lower carbon buildings, so policymakers, rating system developers, professional groups, other researchers, tool developers. And the goal here is really to help harmonize with other efforts and avoid duplicative efforts, but also to get critical feedback on policy frameworks and policy landscapes or code landscapes, kind of regulation landscapes that we can develop both data to support as well as interpretation and implementation guidance for that data. So topic areas would include data collection and harmonization, benchmarking and target setting, interpretation, implementation, and also the support of future research. The third category that we're going to be engaging with is to develop a technical review panel. So we'll be looking to connect with individuals with a high level of expertise in data collection, harmonization, LCA standards, et cetera. And this would really be more about targeted review of specific project documents, content, publication, draft milestones, et cetera. So for the next steps of this project, first, I'll just go through a quick preliminary project schedule. I won't go through all the details, but feel free to pause and check it out. This is just preliminary. It's mostly a sketch. This is all sort of TBD based on the amount of engagement that we get at certain points in the project. But as you can see, the highlighted in green are all the stakeholder engagement efforts. We're targeting to kick off some stakeholder engagement meetings and workshops from now through the end of the year, with a lot of follow-up meetings and workshops in year 2 of this study, more on reviewing preliminary analysis and getting feedback on draft publications, et cetera. Call for data, we're hoping to launch soon with a data collection window that will enable us to meet some of the publication targets later on in 2023 and 2024. Like I said, some upcoming big milestones is data collection. There'll be a separate call that we'll be announcing for the introduction to that, where we'll review project and data types that the CLF will be seeking, as well as modeling guidelines and data submission infrastructure. Also, as a part of that, will be lots of whole building LCA data and practice surveys, calls, and workshops to connect with we're hoping to connect with as many practitioners as we can to get valuable feedback in that space. Also, organizational outreach will be starting with policymakers and code developers. We want to talk with and collaborate with other organizations that are doing similar efforts and try to harmonize as best as possible. There's also talking with tool developers about the inputs and outputs of various whole building LCA tools and how they could be improved to support this study or others, as well as assembling our technical advisory panel. So we do have an open call for participants. If you're interested in participating or just want to stay up to date about the project, please consider filling out our participant questionnaire. It asks for basic information about you or your organization, your level of interest, and your capabilities for participating in the study. For more information, you can also always check out our project webpage, which will be updated regularly throughout the study. And with any specific questions, comments, or suggestions, please feel free to reach out via email at clfbenchmark@uw.edu. So with that, thank you very much for listening, and thank you for your interest and support on this project.